My name is Mackenzie Foy, and I am 29 years old. I'm sitting in my car right now, and I can see my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes are puffy. There's a smudge of mascara on my left cheek. I've been parked in this empty lot for 20 minutes, and I'm trying to figure out where the line is between finally telling the truth and just being bitter. I think I've found it. I think I'm ready to talk about this. It started, like most things, with a quiet moment nobody noticed. I was working at Meridian Accounting, 3rd floor, corner desk with a window that faced the parking lot. This was in 2018. I was 22, and I was the youngest person in the office by about 8 years. I dropped out of college after 2 years because my mom got sick and my dad had already left us when I was 16. Just gone. One day he said he was going to work and never came back. My mom found a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I can't do this anymore." That was it. That was the entirety of his goodbye. So when my mom got diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, I made a choice. I left school, got a job, and started paying for her treatment. I never told anyone this part at work. They all just assumed I was bad at school or lazy or something. That's what people do when you're young and they don't know your story. They fill in the blanks with whatever makes them feel better about themselves. The office was typical: beige walls, fluorescent lights, coffee that tasted like hot disappointment. But the people were worse. There was this hierarchy that nobody officially talked about, but everyone understood. The partners at the top, the senior accountants in the middle, and then everyone else. I was everyone else, except I was more alone than everyone else because I was the only one working 2 jobs. During the day, I'd answer phones and file documents and run reports that nobody checked. At night, I worked retail at a mall store, selling clothes to people who had problems that seemed so small compared to mine. I'd stand there making minimum wage, while women my age would complain about their boyfriends not texting them back fast enough. I wanted to grab them and shake them and tell them how lucky they were to have such small problems. But I didn't. I smiled. I folded sweaters. I went home and fell asleep to the sound of my mom vomiting in the bathroom. The kindness came from someone I barely knew. Her name was Linda, and she worked in the records department on the 2nd floor. I'd passed her in the hallway maybe 5 times before the day she stopped me. I was carrying a stack of files and I'd tripped on the stairs. The papers went everywhere. I was on my hands and knees picking them up, and I could feel people watching. Nobody helped. They just stepped around me like I was invisible. Linda came back up the stairs. I didn't know she'd already passed me, and she knelt down without saying anything. We picked them up together. She was probably in her 50s, wearing a lavender cardigan, and she smelled like vanilla. When we were done, she stood up and dusted off her knees and looked at me directly in the eyes. "You're working too hard," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm fine," I said, "because that's what you say. You're not eating lunch with anyone. You sit alone with a sandwich. You look at everyone like you hate them and yourself at the same time." She wasn't being mean. Her voice was soft. That's the look of someone carrying something very heavy. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. The next day, Linda left a small container of homemade soup on my desk. Just sat it there. No note, no explanation. It was chicken and vegetables, and I sat at my desk and cried while I ate it. I cried so hard that my shoulders shook, and I had to pretend I was laughing when people walked by. That soup was the first act of kindness a stranger had shown me in so long that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. For the next month, Linda left me things. Sometimes it was soup. Sometimes it was a banana or a muffin she'd made. She never made a big deal about it. She never asked how I was doing or told me that things would get better. She just left food on my desk and walked away. And I felt less alone. I should have paid attention to how good that felt. I should have recognized it. But I was too busy drowning. My mom finished her treatment in early 2019. The cancer went into remission. I remember sitting in the car in the parking lot of the treatment center, and she reached over and squeezed my hand, and we didn't say anything because we were both crying too hard. That was supposed to be the turning point. That was supposed to be the moment where everything got better. It didn't work that way. The medical bills were astronomical. We owed money to the hospital, the pharmacy, the radiologist. My mom's job had let her go because she missed too much work during treatment, and she couldn't find another job. Nobody wants to hire someone who's still in recovery. I picked up more shifts at the mall store. I stopped sleeping. I started drinking coffee at 9 p.m. just to function, which meant I'd lie in bed at night, my heart racing, staring at the ceiling. And then my Aunt Rachel came back into our lives. She was my mom's sister, and they hadn't spoken in about 5 years. There was some kind of fight. My mom had never told me exactly what it was about, and they just stopped talking. But somehow Aunt Rachel heard about the cancer and she called. My mom cried when she heard her voice. They talked for 2 hours, and by the end my mom seemed lighter than she had in months. Aunt Rachel lived about 40 minutes away in a nice neighborhood with a big house. She had a husband named David who was a lawyer, and they had money. Real money. The kind where you don't check the price of things. My mom started visiting her on weekends, and sometimes she'd call me and tell me about the fancy dinner they'd had, and her voice would sound happier than I'd heard it in years. One day my mom came home and said that Aunt Rachel had offered to help with the medical bills. She said it like she was confessing something. I remember feeling something shift inside me. Relief, yes, but also something darker, something like shame. I'd been killing myself, working myself into nothing, and here was my aunt just handing out money like it was nothing. But I was so tired, so I let her help. Things changed after that, not immediately but slowly. My mom stopped looking as worried. She got a new job at a real estate office, not through me but through a connection Aunt Rachel made. Suddenly she was making decent money. Suddenly we weren't drowning anymore. She paid me back for some of the medical bills I'd covered, and I was able to quit the mal job. I could breathe again. Aunt Rachel started coming to our house. She'd bring wine and nice things from the grocery store. And she and my mom would talk for hours. I'd sit with them sometimes, and I could see how much my mom loved her, how much she needed that sisterly bond. I was glad for her. I was. But I also felt something poisonous growing in my chest, something I didn't know how to name. It was resentment, but it was more than that. It was the question of why it took my mom's sister's money to matter. Why hadn't my sacrifices been enough? Why wasn't I enough? I pushed the feeling down. I was working less now, and I enrolled in online college courses. I wanted to prove something, though I wasn't sure to whom. Maybe to myself, maybe to my dad, even though he didn't deserve my thoughts. I started saving money. I was doing okay. Life was moving forward. Then, in December 2020, my mom asked me to help her clean out the basement. We were sorting through old boxes when we found a journal. It was leather-bound, with Aunt Rachel's initials on the front. It had fallen behind a shelf, probably years ago. My mom picked it up and opened it without thinking about it, the way you do when you find something in your own house. And then her entire body went still. She read the entry once, then she read it again. Her face went completely white. She sat down on the concrete floor right there in the basement, and she looked at me and she said she knew, all this time, she knew. I sat next to her and read over her shoulder. The entry was from 2014, 6 years earlier. Aunt Rachel had written about how my mom's marriage was failing, how much my mom was struggling financially, how she could help by being there. But then she wrote something that made my stomach drop. If I'm careful, I can become the daughter she always wanted. Mackenzie is weak. Jessica will start to depend on me, and eventually I'll be the important one. Finally. There were other entries. Entries about feeling invisible in her own marriage. Entries about how David didn't appreciate her. Entries about how our family needed her more than anyone had ever needed her before, and it felt good. My mom's hand was shaking. "What does this mean?" I said, though I think I already knew. "It means," my mom said quietly, "that she didn't help me because she loved me. She helped me because she needed to matter to someone." I felt like I was going to be sick. The next part happened quickly. My mom called Aunt Rachel and asked her to come over. When she got there, my mom showed her the journal. I watched Aunt Rachel read it, and I watched her realize that she'd been discovered. She didn't apologize. She got defensive. She said my mom was being ungrateful, that everything she'd done had been real, that the journal was just her processing her emotions. "You can't hold that against me," she said. "I actually helped you. I actually showed up." And my mom, with a voice so quiet and controlled it terrified me, said, "You showed up for you. You always showed up for you." Aunt Rachel left and never came back. My mom stopped taking her calls, but the damage was done because Aunt Rachel had made herself essential to my mom's recovery, and now there was this wound that couldn't be closed. More than that, though, there was the recognition of something I'd been running from. My aunt had shown up for my mom in a way that I hadn't. Even though her motivations were selfish, she had still been present, and I'd been angry about that. I'd been so tired and so angry that I'd let my mom's relief and happiness poison me, when I should have just been grateful that she wasn't drowning anymore. I had failed her. I spiraled after that. I dropped out of college again. I told myself it was because of the situation with Aunt Rachel, but the truth was darker. The truth was that I'd built my entire identity on being the strong one, the one who sacrifices, the martyr. And when I didn't have to be that person anymore, I didn't know who I was. I stopped going to work. I called in sick for 2 weeks and then I just didn't go back. I didn't call. I didn't email. I just stopped. I spent my days lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, drinking wine that I couldn't afford, understanding for the first time in my life why my father had left. Sometimes you get so tired of being yourself that you just want to disappear. My mom found me on a Tuesday morning. I hadn't left my room in 4 days. I was still in pajamas. I wasn't eating. She came in and sat on my bed and she started to cry and she said, I need you to come back. I can't do this alone. But that made it worse because now I wasn't just failing myself. I was failing her. I was the strong one. I was the sacrifice. I was supposed to be unbreakable and I was breaking in real time. I don't remember exactly when I decided to text Linda. I knew she'd retired the year before. Someone at the office had mentioned she'd left, but I had her email from when she'd sent me messages over the years. I sent her an email just saying, I'm not doing well. I don't know who to talk to. She called me 15 minutes later. We talked for an hour. I told her about the medical bills and the college and the job and the aunt and the breaking. I told her everything. And Linda listened, and she didn't try to fix it and she didn't give me advice. She just listened, and at the end she said something simple. You've been running on empty for so long that you forgot what it felt like to be full. You're not broken, you're just exhausted. She asked if I'd ever been to a therapist, and I said no. She said that's what she'd found helpful when she was trying to figure out who she was outside of being useful to other people. She said it took time, but it saved her life. I started therapy the following week. I found a therapist named Dr. Patel, and I sat in her office and I said, I don't know why I'm here, I'm the strong one, and she looked at me and said, who told you that, and why did you believe them? That's the question that changed everything. For months, I sat in that office and untangled the narrative I'd built about myself. The story I'd told myself about being strong had actually been a story about being broken and pretending not to be. The story about sacrifice had been a story about not knowing my own worth. The story about my father leaving had been a story I'd internalized to mean that I was unlovable, so I had to prove my value by destroying myself for people who would never love me enough to stop me. It's a brutal thing to see yourself clearly. But something else happened too. As I started to recover, I started to remember what Linda had done, how she'd seen me when I was invisible to everyone else, how she'd left that soup on my desk not because she needed something from me, but because she'd recognized suffering and she'd wanted to ease it. No expectations, no conditions, no drama. I called her one day and asked if we could have coffee. We met at a small place near her house. And I told her that I'd been in therapy, and I'd realized what she'd done for me during those months when I was drowning. You didn't know me, I said. You didn't owe me anything, but you saw that I was carrying something and you tried to make it lighter. She smiled and her eyes got a little watery. I've always believed that the smallest acts of kindness are the most powerful ones, she said, because they don't require anything except to notice someone, really notice them, and decide that you're going to take a tiny bit of their weight. It's nothing and everything at the same time. I started volunteering at a community centre that offered free services to people in crisis. I worked with women who were in situations similar to mine, overworked, underpaid, carrying the weight of their family's survival. I didn't give them advice. I just made them tea, and I sat with them, and I listened. Sometimes I'd make a pasta salad and leave containers in the community centre refrigerator with no name attached, just like Linda had done. And I got better, slowly, not all at once. There were still hard days, still days when the weight of what I'd sacrificed and who I'd lost came back, but I learned that I could sit with that weight without being destroyed by it. As for my aunt, here's where the twist comes in, and I didn't see it coming. About 2 years after we found the journal, my mom got a message from Uncle David. He wanted to meet with her alone. She was reluctant, but she went. When she came home, she looked completely shell-shocked. David had gotten a promotion that would require him to move to another state. Aunt Rachel didn't want to go. She wanted to stay to maintain her position with my mom, but David was giving her an ultimatum: come with him or he'd file for divorce and she'd get nothing. And when my mom told my aunt that she wasn't going to reward her betrayal by letting her stay, when my mom finally set a boundary, Aunt Rachel had tried to convince David that my mom was an ungrateful bitch who would abandon her sister just like that. She tried to poison him against my mom too. And David, the lawyer who'd been eerily quiet in all of this, had apparently seen the journals himself. He'd shown them to his divorce attorney. Aunt Rachel didn't get nothing, but she got much less than she'd expected, and she had to move away, and she lost the daughter replacement she'd been cultivating. When my mom told me this, I felt something I wasn't expecting, pity. Because I realized that Aunt Rachel had the same disease I'd had. The disease of thinking your worth was determined by what you could give, by how needed you were, by whether you could make yourself essential to someone. She just expressed it differently than I had. Instead of being angry, I felt sad for her. She'd sacrificed her marriage, her sister, and her self-respect for the fantasy of being needed, and in the end, she'd gotten nothing but loneliness. It made me realize that my father's abandonment and my aunt's betrayal weren't really about me at all. They were about two broken people who couldn't figure out who they were, so they hurt the people around them. That doesn't make it okay, but it makes it understandable. It makes it possible to forgive not them, but myself for ever believing that their actions were reflections of my worth. Now I'm 29, I'm working as a mental health counselor. I have my bachelor's degree and I'm working toward my master's. My mom is healthy and happy, and she's dating a kind man she met at work, a man who shows up for her without needing anything in return. I talk to Linda regularly. She's become like a grandmother to me, and I've become like a granddaughter to her, which is funny because she has two actual grandsons who don't call her back. And the people from my old office. Yeah, some of them reached out after they realized I'd left without explanation. The senior accountants who used to watch me struggle. The partners who made me feel small. They wanted to know how I'd managed to go back to school while working, how I'd managed to get a degree, how I'd turned my life around when all the odds were against me. I didn't tell them the truth, that the answer wasn't some secret grinding or hidden talent. The answer was that someone showed me that I was worth being kind to, and I learned, slowly and painfully, that I was worth being kind to myself. I don't know why people ask that question. I don't know why they want to reduce a complete emotional transformation into a 5-minute conversation. Maybe they're not ready to hear the answer. Maybe it's easier to think that some people are just built different, that I'm made of stronger stuff than they are. But I'm not stronger. I'm just less willing now to pretend that breaking in private is the same as staying whole. The other day I was at the grocery store, and I saw a young girl, probably early 20s, with dark circles under her eyes, carrying herself like she was invisible. She was wearing a name tag from a retail job, and it was 8 p.m. She looked exhausted in a way that only comes from carrying a weight that's not yours to carry. I watched her for a minute. Then I picked up some homemade soup I'd made earlier that week. I always make extra now, and I left it on the shelf next to where she was standing. I didn't watch to see if she took it. I didn't wait for her gratitude. I just did it and walked away. Because that's the thing about kindness. That's what Linda taught me. Sometimes the people who need it most are invisible, and sometimes all it takes to make them visible again is a person who's willing to see them. I'm still figuring out who I am. I still have days where I'm angry about everything I gave up. I still have days where I wonder if I was just born to lose things, to people, to myself. But I have more days now where I remember that I'm allowed to take care of myself, where I recognize that my worth isn't determined by what I survive or what I sacrifice, where I can sit with someone else's pain and say, I see you, and mean it, without needing them to fix my broken parts in the process. And that, I think, is the real victory. Not the degree, not the job, not the people who suddenly want to know my secrets. It's just that I'm here, I'm still here, and I'm choosing to be gentle with myself about the time it took to figure that out.